What would happen if someone dared to break tradition in a town built on pride and silence? In 1875 Texas, one woman makes a choice that no one else would, and it could change everything. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from, and why you're following this. The hot summer sun beat down mercilessly on Willow Creek, Texas, as preparations for the annual Founders Day celebration were underway. The year was 1875, and the small frontier town was buzzing with activity. Emma Thornton, the 22-year-old daughter of the wealthiest man in the county, stood on the porch of her father's grand house, watching with growing irritation as the town council members argued over the same tired agenda they discussed every year. "Miss Emma, your father requests your presence in the study," said Martha, the family's longtime housekeeper, her face lined with years of service to the Thornton household. Emma sighed, smoothing down her elegant blue dress before making her way to her father's study. The wooden floorboards creaked beneath her feet as she walked through the spacious hallway adorned with paintings of her ancestors, who had established themselves as cattle barons in this part of Texas. Judge William Thornton sat behind his mahogany desk, his gray hair neatly combed and his stern expression softening slightly at the sight of his daughter. Next to him stood Mayor Heiress and Sheriff Cooper, both looking uncomfortable in their Sunday best despite the heat. "Emma, my dear," her father began, "we were just discussing the upcoming Founders Day celebration. As you know, it's an important occasion to honor the establishment of our town and the brave men who built it." Emma fought the urge to roll her eyes. "The brave white men, you mean, father?" The three men exchanged uneasy glances. "Now, Emma," Mayor Harrison said with a patronizing smile, "we all know the history of our great town. Your grandfather was one of the first settlers here, and before him, this land belonged to the Comanche people." Emma interjected, her blue eyes flashing with determination. "Yet every year, we celebrate as if history began with our arrival." Sheriff Cooper cleared his throat. "Miss Thornton, some subjects are best left alone for the sake of peace. The treaties are signed and the reservations established." "Peace?" Emma challenged. "Is that what you call forcing people from their ancestral lands and calling it progress? I've read the accounts, Sheriff. I've educated myself beyond what they teach at Miss Porter's school for young ladies." Judge Thornton stood up, his patience wearing thin. "Emma, that's quite enough. We didn't come here to debate politics with a young woman who has been reading too many sensationalist newspapers." Emma's cheeks flushed with indignation. "It's not politics, Father. It's humanity. And I'm tired of the empty talk about community and togetherness when we exclude the very people whose land we stand upon." Her father's face hardened. "You will watch your tone, young lady. As the daughter of a judge and a Thornton, you have responsibilities to uphold our family's reputation." Emma straightened her back, a plan forming in her mind. "You're right, Father. I do have responsibilities. And as the chairwoman of the Founders Day Committee, a position you insisted I take, I believe I have the authority to extend invitations to this community event." Mayor Harrison's bushy eyebrows shot up. "What exactly are you suggesting, Miss Thornton?" With a steady voice that betrayed none of her inner turmoil, Emma announced, "I'm inviting representatives from the Comanche tribe to our celebration. It's time we acknowledged all the founders of this land, not just those who claimed it most recently." The silence that followed was deafening. Sheriff Cooper's hand instinctively moved to his holster, while her father's face turned an alarming shade of red. "You will do no such thing," Judge Thornton thundered. "Have you lost your mind?" "The tensions are already high with the raids that happened last spring." Emma remained steadfast. "Those raids happened because of broken promises and starvation on the reservations. Perhaps if we extended a hand in peace, instead of raising fists in war, we might find a different path forward." "This discussion is over," her father declared, slamming his hand on the desk. "You will follow tradition as we always have." As the men continued their meeting, deliberately excluding her from further discussion, Emma slipped out of the study, her mind made up. If they wouldn't listen to reason, she would have to take matters into her own hands. The next morning, before dawn broke over the rolling Texas hills, Emma saddled her chestnut mare Penny. She wore her riding clothes, practical trousers hidden beneath, a split skirt that scandalized the town when she first wore it, but allowed her to ride astride rather than side saddle. Penny's hooves kicked up dust as they galloped away from town, heading toward the reservation lands that lay a half-day's ride to the west. Emma knew the risks she was taking. A young woman traveling alone was already cause for concern, but heading to Comanche territory was considered downright foolhardy. Yet the fire of conviction burned bright within her, fueled by years of witnessing injustice, masked as progress and civility. The sun had climbed high in the sky by the time Emma approached the boundaries of the reservation. Her heart pounded against her ribs, not from fear, but from the weight of her mission. The landscape had changed, the lush ranch lands giving way to drier, more rugged terrain that the government had deemed suitable for the Comanche people, despite its poor agricultural prospects. As she neared a small creek, Emma spotted a lone figure crouched by the water. A man with long black hair, dressed in a mixture of traditional Comanche clothing and cast-off American garments, was filling a water skin. He looked up sharply at the sound of approaching hooves, his hand moving swiftly to the knife at his belt. Emma slowed Penny to a walk, raising her empty hands to show she meant no harm. "Hello," she called out, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "I come in peace. I'm looking for someone who might speak with me about an invitation." The man stood, his dark eyes studying her with suspicion. He was tall and powerfully built, his face weathered by the elements and hardship. "White women don't come here alone," he stated in clear, if accented English. "You lost or foolish?" "Neither, I hope," Emma replied, dismounting but keeping a respectful distance. "My name is Emma Thornton from Willow Creek. I've come to extend an invitation to your leaders for our town's Founders Day celebration." A bitter laugh escaped the man's lips. "Founders Day? Celebrating the theft of our land? Why would we attend such a thing?" Emma met his gaze directly. "Because it's wrong that we celebrate without acknowledging those who were here first. I want to change that, but I can't do it alone." The man's expression remained skeptical, but something in his eyes shifted slightly. "I am Swift River," he finally said. "Once a warrior, now ... what? A man caught between worlds." "I understand that feeling more than you might think," Emma said softly. "Being caught between what is expected and what is right." Swift River regarded her for a long moment before gesturing toward a path that led away from the creek. "Come, you will speak with Elder Rising Moon. She will decide if your words have truth or are just more empty promises." They walked in silence, leading their horses along a narrow trail that wound through scrubby mesquite trees. Emma could feel curious eyes watching from hidden vantage points. The reservation might be controlled by the U.S. Army, but the Comanche still maintained their own watchfulness. The settlement they entered was a painful shadow of what Emma had read about Comanche camps in their days of freedom. Government-issue canvas tents mixed with more traditional tipis. Children with hollow cheeks played listlessly in the dust, while women worked at cooking fires, their movements efficient but lacking joy. Swift River led her to a tipi larger than the others, decorated with fading symbols that Emma couldn't interpret. "Wait here," he instructed before ducking inside. Emma stood quietly, enduring the stares of the community. A small girl, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, approached cautiously, reaching out to touch Emma's skirt with wonder. "Hello," Emma smiled, crouching down to the child's level. "What's your name?" The girl shyly retreated without answering as an elderly woman emerged from the tipi. Rising Moon's face was deeply lined, her long gray hair braided with small beads woven throughout. Despite her age, she stood straight, dignity emanating from her like a physical force. "Emma Thornton," Rising Moon said, her voice surprisingly strong. "Swift River says you bring an invitation. Come inside and speak your truth." The interior of the tipi was cool and dim. Emma sat cross-legged on a woven mat, accepting a cup of bitter tea with murmured thanks. Swift River remained standing near the entrance, his arms crossed over his chest. My town celebrates its founding each year, Emma began, with speeches and dancing and feasting. But we never acknowledged that the land wasn't empty when my grandfather and others arrived. I want to change that. I want to invite representatives from your people to attend, to be recognized and honored as the first people of this land. Rising Moon's dark eyes seemed to peer into Emma's soul. Many white people have come with pretty words before. Words like peace and cooperation. Those words turned to ash when it came time to honor them. Emma nodded solemnly. I know our history. I don't claim to speak for all white settlers, only for myself. But change has to begin somewhere, with someone willing to take the first step. And if your town rejects this idea, if they refuse to welcome our people, Swift River challenged, then I will have shown them their true nature, Emma replied with determination. And I will continue to fight for what's right, even if I stand alone. A long silence followed as Rising Moon contemplated Emma's words. Finally, the elder spoke. I will send Swift River and my granddaughter Morning Star to your celebration, not as spectators or curiosities, but as representatives of the Numanu, the people. Relief and gratitude washed over Emma. Thank you, Elder Rising Moon. I promise they will be treated with respect. Rising Moon's expression remained serious. Swift River was once one of our most promising young warriors before the reservation. He attended the white man's school at Fort Sill for 3 winters. He knows your ways but has not forgotten ours. Morning Star is learning both worlds as well. They will judge if your invitation is truly a step toward understanding or merely a salve for your conscience. Swift River's jaw tightened, but he nodded in acceptance of the elder's decision. As Emma prepared to leave, Rising Moon touched her arm gently. Your heart seems true, Emma Thornton, but be warned. Good intentions can shatter against the stone of hatred and fear. Are you prepared for what may come? Emma swallowed hard, the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. I have to try, she answered simply. Sometimes, courage is just taking the next right step, even when you can't see the entire path ahead. As she rode back toward Willow Creek with Swift River accompanying her partway to ensure her safe passage, Emma knew that the real challenge lay ahead. Convincing her father and the town to truly welcome the Comanche representatives would require all her determination and diplomatic skill. What she couldn't know was that her actions had already set in motion events that would forever change Willow Creek and her own destiny. The news of Emma's unauthorized mission spread through Willow Creek like wildfire. By the time she returned home, her father was waiting on the porch, his face a thundercloud of anger and concern. Do you have any idea what you've done? Judge Thornton demanded as she dismounted. Riding out alone to the reservation? You could have been killed. Emma handed Penny's reins to the stable boy who had hurried over. I'm perfectly fine, Father. The Comanche people were hospitable and respectful, more so than many in this town would have been to them. That's not the point. Her father's voice rose, drawing the attention of passers-by who slowed to eavesdrop. You've undermined my authority and the town council's decisions. And for what? Some misguided notion of justice? Emma straightened her shoulders. 2 representatives from the reservation will be attending our Founders' Day celebration. Elder Rising Moon has selected Swift River and a young woman named Morning Star to represent their people. Judge Thornton's face paled. You actually invited them? After I expressly forbade it? Yes, Emma stated firmly. And as chairwoman of the celebration committee, I had every right to do so. Her father grabbed her arm, steering her forcefully into the house and away from curious onlookers. Once inside, he released her and began pacing the parlor. This isn't some ladies' tea party you're organizing, Emma. There are complicated politics at play. Sheriff Cooper is already dealing with ranchers complaining about missing cattle. The Army has warned about increased tensions. And you invite Comanche to our town celebration? One of whom was educated at Fort Sill and speaks perfect English, Emma countered. Swift River is hardly the savage warrior you're imagining, Father. And this continued separation only breeds more mistrust and hatred. Judge Thornton collapsed into his leather armchair, suddenly looking older than his 55 years. You don't understand the real world, Emma. You've been sheltered here, allowed to read your books and indulge in idealistic fantasies. Is that what you think this is? A fantasy? Emma knelt beside her father's chair. What fantasy teaches us to deny the humanity of others? What fantasy tells us that justice only applies to people who look like us? For a moment, something flickered in her father's eyes, a shadow of doubt, perhaps before his expression hardened once more. The invitations are sent. The damage is done. But understand this. You will be personally responsible for these ... guests. Any trouble they cause falls squarely on your shoulders. Emma nodded solemnly. I accept that responsibility. The following days were a flurry of activity as the town prepared for the celebration. Emma found herself facing cold shoulders from many of the committee members who had previously sought her approval. Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife, resigned from her position overseeing the food preparations, citing a sudden illness that everyone knew was fictional. Only Rebecca Miller, the schoolteacher, stood firmly by Emma's side. It's about time someone had the courage to acknowledge the true history of this place, Rebecca said as they hung bunting across the town square. My students learn a sanitized version of how this town came to be. Maybe this will help change that. The day before the celebration, Emma was arranging flowers in the church hall when Sheriff Cooper approached, his thumbs hooked in his belt loops. Miss Thornton, I feel it's my duty to inform you that I've received some concerning information. There's talk among some of the young men in town, particularly the Wilkins brothers and their friends, about making sure your Comanche guests don't feel welcome. Emma's hand stilled. What kind of talk? Nothing specific, the sheriff hedged. But enough that I thought you should know. These boys lost their uncle in a raid 3 years back. They hold grudges. And what do you intend to do about it, Sheriff? Emma challenged. Cooper adjusted his hat uncomfortably. I've warned them to keep the peace, but I can't be everywhere at once during the celebration. So you're telling me you won't protect guests who have been officially invited to a town function? Emma's voice rose with indignation. I'm telling you that actions have consequences, Miss Thornton. Your father warned you. With that, he turned and left her standing among the half-arranged flowers. That evening, Emma sat at her writing desk, penning a note to Swift River that she would have delivered to the reservation boundary at first light. She needed to warn him of the potential danger, giving him the choice to reconsider attending. As she wrote, she realized how much she had come to respect him during their brief acquaintance, his dignity in the face of injustice, his intelligence, and his willingness to bridge two worlds despite the personal cost. The possibility that he might choose not to come left her with an unexpected hollow feeling. She sealed the letter with wax, impressing her family's crest into the red puddle, and set it aside. Dawn broke clear and promising on Founder's Day. Emma dressed with particular care in a new dress of deep green that complemented her auburn hair. As she fastened a cameo at her throat, her mother's, one of the few items she had to remember, the woman who had died when Emma was just 10, Martha, knocked at her door. A message for you, Miss Emma, the housekeeper said, extending a folded paper. Brought by a boy from the reservation edge. Emma's fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. The handwriting was precise and educated, Swift River's response to her warning. Miss Thornton, your honesty does you credit. Morning Star and I will arrive as planned at noon. The path to understanding is rarely without obstacles. Some risks are worth taking, Sr. Relief and apprehension battled within her as she tucked the note into her pocket. The celebration would begin at 10 o'clock with speeches, followed by a community meal, games, and dancing that would continue well into the evening. Swift River and Morning Star would arrive during the meal, a calculated decision to have them join when the community was at its most relaxed and convivial. As Emma descended the stairs, her father waited in the foyer, formally dressed in his judge's attire. His expression was stern but resigned. I've instructed Sheriff Cooper to post deputies near the town square, he said gruffly. I don't approve of what you've done, Emma, but I won't have violence at our celebration. Emma kissed his cheek, unexpected tears pricking her eyes. Thank you, Father. Judge Thornton harumphed, but his hand briefly covered hers where it rested on his arm. "You're as stubborn as your mother was. Heaven help the man who eventually marries you." The town square was transformed with flags, bunting, and flowers. Tables groaned under the weight of food prepared by the town's women. Children darted between adults, their faces already sticky with candy. The mood was festive, though Emma noted clusters of men speaking in low voices, casting occasional glances her way. At precisely noon, a stir moved through the crowd. Emma, who had positioned herself near the eastern entrance to the square, turned to see Swift River and a young woman riding slowly into town. They sat tall and proud on their horses, dressed in a blend of traditional Comanche clothing and American items that seemed chosen to bridge their two worlds. Morning Star, whom Emma guessed to be about 17, wore a beautifully beaded dress with a simple silver cross at her throat. Swift River had braided his long hair and wore a clean white shirt under a traditional fringed leather vest. Emma moved forward to greet them, painfully aware of the sudden hush that had fallen over the celebration. She could feel hundreds of eyes tracking her movements as she approached the newcomers with a welcoming smile. "Swift River, Morning Star, welcome to Willow Creek's Founders' Day," she said, her clear voice carrying across the unnaturally quiet square. "We're honored by your presence." As Swift River dismounted and helped Morning Star down from her horse, the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. The future of Emma's vision for a more inclusive community hung in the balance as townspeople and Comanche representatives faced each other across a divide far greater than the few feet of dusty ground between them. The silence stretched painfully as Emma stood between the Comanche guests and the townspeople of Willow Creek. Then, to her immense relief, Rebecca Miller stepped forward, her hand extended. "Welcome to our celebration," the schoolteacher said warmly. "I'm Rebecca Miller. I teach at our town school, and I've always wanted to learn more about Comanche educational traditions." Morning Star's face brightened as she accepted Rebecca's handshake. "I help teach our children on the reservation," she replied in careful English. "Perhaps we could share knowledge." This simple exchange seemed to break the spell. Mayor Harrison, ever conscious of appearances, hurried forward with an artificial smile. Yes, welcome indeed. Please, join us for our community feast." Emma guided Swift River and Morning Star toward the food tables, acutely aware of the mixture of curiosity, hostility, and uncertainty on the faces they passed. Children stared openly, some hiding behind their mothers' skirts, others pointing and whispering. "Everyone is watching us," Morning Star murmured to Emma. "Let them watch," Emma replied quietly. "Sometimes seeing is the first step to understanding." As they filled their plates with fried chicken, cornbread, and fresh vegetables, Emma introduced them to those townspeople brave enough to approach. Some, like old Dr. Wilson, who had treated patients of all races throughout his long career, were genuinely welcoming. Others offered stiff nods before quickly moving away. Swift River maintained a dignified reserve throughout these interactions, his dark eyes missing nothing. When they found seats at one of the long tables, he finally spoke directly to Emma. "Your town is exactly as you described it," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Divided between those who fear change and those who see its necessity." Emma nodded, watching as the Wilkins brothers and their friends congregated near the cider barrel, casting dark glances in their direction. "The fear runs deep," she acknowledged, "but so does the capacity for growth." As the meal progressed, the initial tension began to ease slightly. Morning Star proved to be a natural diplomat, her gentle manner and intelligent questions drawing reluctant conversation from those seated near her. She spoke of her dreams to become a proper teacher, perhaps even to attend a teaching college someday. "The children need to know both worlds now," she explained to Rebecca and several other women who had gathered around her. "The old ways alone will not help them survive, but without them, they lose who they are." Meanwhile, Swift River found himself engaged in an unexpected conversation with Emma's father. Judge Thornton had approached their table with obvious reluctance, duty compelling him to acknowledge his daughter's guests. I understand you attended school at Fort Sill, the judge said stiffly. Swift River met his gaze steadily. 3 years. I learned to read Shakespeare and solve mathematical equations, while my family was being moved from their hunting grounds to the reservation. Judge Thornton flinched slightly at the pointed response but persisted. And what did you take from that education? That knowledge is neither white nor Comanche, Swift River replied. It simply is. How we use it determines its value. Something in this response seemed to resonate with the judge, who nodded thoughtfully before being called away to begin the traditional Founders' Day speeches. As the community gathered before the small wooden platform erected for the occasion, Emma noticed with concern that the Wilkins brothers had disappeared from the cider barrel. Her unease grew as she scanned the crowd, finally spotting them near the livery stable where Swift River and Morning Star had left their horses. "Excuse me," she murmured, slipping away as her father began his customary address about the courage and vision of Willow Creek's founders. Emma approached the livery from behind, moving quietly along the side of the building. She could hear low voices and stifled laughter, the unmistakable sounds of mischief in progress. Peering around the corner, she saw Billy and Jasper Wilkins, along with 2 of their friends, hunched over the Comanche horses' saddles. "This'll send them a message," Billy was saying as he cut through the leather cinch of Swift River's saddle. "Next time they ride out, they'll take a nasty fall." "What do you think you're doing?" Emma demanded, stepping into view. The young men straightened abruptly, guilt and defiance warring on their faces. "Teaching your Comanche friends a lesson," Jasper replied, his hand still gripping his knife. "Our Uncle Jacob died with Comanche arrows in his chest, or did you forget that, Miss Emma? And how many Comanche died from army bullets?" Emma countered, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Does more violence honor your uncle's memory, or does it just continue the cycle of hatred that killed him?" Billy stepped toward her, his face flushed with anger and the effects of too much cider. "You've got no right to invite them here, acting like they belong among decent folk." "They have more right to be here than any of us," Emma said firmly. "This was their land long before it was ours. Is there a problem here?" Sheriff Cooper's voice cut through the tension as he rounded the corner, hand resting meaningfully on his holster. The Wilkins brothers exchanged glances, their bravado deflating under the sheriff's stern gaze. "Just checking on the horses, Sheriff," Billy muttered unconvincingly. "With knives drawn? Move along, boys, now." Cooper's tone left no room for argument. As the young men slunk away, Emma examined the damage to Swift River's saddle. "The cinch is nearly cut through," she told the sheriff. "If he'd ridden out like this, he could have been seriously injured or killed." Cooper's weathered face tightened. "I'll have the saddle repaired before they leave. And I'll be having words with the Wilkins boy's father." He studied Emma for a moment. "You realize this could have ended much worse. Because I invited Comanche guests to our celebration?" Emma challenged. "Because change doesn't come easy, Miss Emma. Not to towns, not to people." The sheriff tipped his hat and departed to arrange repairs for the saddle. When Emma returned to the town square, she was surprised to find Swift River standing at the edge of the platform, addressing the crowd. Judge Thornton stood nearby, his expression a complex mixture of discomfort and reluctant respect. "We share this land now, whether by choice or by force," Swift River was saying, his voice carrying clearly across the hushed gathering. "The past cannot be undone, but the future is not yet written. My people have a saying, 'A single arrow is easily broken, but many arrows bundled together cannot be broken.' Perhaps there is wisdom in this for all of us." As he stepped down, scattered applause broke out, led by Rebecca Miller and, to Emma's astonishment, her father. The sound swelled uncertainly, neither enthusiastic nor dismissive, the sound of a community confronting its complex history and uncertain future. The remainder of the celebration proceeded without incident. As evening approached and lanterns were lit for the dancing portion of the festivities, Emma found herself standing beside Swift River at the edge of the square. "Your saddle was damaged," she told him quietly. "Sheriff Cooper is having it repaired." Swift River nodded, seeming unsurprised. I saw the Wilkins brothers watching us with hatred in their eyes. I know what grief can do to a person's heart. I'm sorry, Emma said, feeling the weight of the day's events. Perhaps this was too much too soon. Or perhaps it was exactly what was needed, Swift River replied, his gaze following Morning Star as she tentatively joined a circle dance with Rebecca and several other young women. Look there, not all seeds fall on stony ground. As fiddle music filled the night air, Emma realized that Swift River was right. The celebration hadn't transformed Willow Creek overnight, but small changes were visible if one knew where to look. Children approaching Morning Star with curious questions instead of fear. Judge Thornton deep in conversation with Swift River about reservation conditions. Even gruff Sheriff Cooper ensuring their saddles would be safe for their journey home. Will you come back? Emma asked impulsively. For next year's celebration? Swift River's expression softened as he looked at her. That depends on what happens between now and then. One day cannot erase decades of mistrust, but it can be a beginning. As the stars appeared overhead, Emma felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path ahead would not be easy. There would be resistance, setbacks, and hard conversations. But today had proven that change was possible, one courageous step at a time. When Swift River and Morning Star departed the next morning, a small crowd gathered to see them off, not the entire town, but enough to suggest that Emma's vision of a more inclusive community might someday become reality. Judge Thornton stood beside his daughter as they watched the Comanche representatives ride away. You've started something here, Emma, he said quietly. I'm not entirely sure what, but I suspect Willow Creek will never be quite the same. Emma smiled, thinking of Swift River's words about arrows bundled together. That's exactly what I was hoping for, Father. That's exactly what I was hoping for.